One of the hot topics, Jenny, is around sustainability.
Mm.
Now, I know you're quite passionate about this subject, so I'm interested for the listeners to get a view from you about how AV can be sustainable, because I still look at it and thinking, well, it's hardware, it's clunky, you've still
Yeah.
got to deal with it. You know, can it be sustainable? So what's your view, and how can companies make it more sustainable for AV?
Right. So, I mean, nothing's sustainable, really, is it? Aside from using only rainwater, and so there's very few parts of our life that are entirely sustainable. The electric car movement, but what happens with the batteries, etc. There's always a what if next to it, but everyone can improve. And I think that I've really taken a deep interest in what can be improved upon within our industry and our industry as a collective. And that spans right across the whole IT sector really as well. So what you do individually and in your own home, that's up to you, and you can take that as far as you want. Midwich in the UK, we plant trees to offset any air miles, etc. We've got all sorts of initiatives running for giving back and being as sustainable as we can. We no longer have any disposable cups, etc. in the office and so on. So all of those changes, they're for individual businesses and individuals to make. But actually, there's two ways to look at sustainability and what we can do as an industry on the whole. One, we do actually help. So we talked about that 0.5 millimeter and the reality and the human eye not being able to detect what's real and what's not. We're close to creating virtual experiences that are pretty much lifelike for people, which can then definitely reduce the carbon footprint of people traveling to go and get those experiences. So I'm not saying that, nobody will go to Universal Studios anymore because we've created a virtual walkthrough, but it will be an option for some people who want to experience things but don't want the carbon footprint that comes with that. And maybe that does mean in the future that we can reduce or change air travel to whilst we figure out a way to make it less polluting. So that you look at how we're doing this now has stopped me from taking a 200-mile trip down to your studio. How I do my job, in fact, I used to fly. Now, looking back, you go, why did we do that? Why did I fly everywhere? But I gave a keynote speech for our business in Dubai over Teams. It worked brilliantly. I was much bigger in person on the display there. So we work in an industry that is actually helping to reduce carbon footprint in some ways. Then we've got this ridiculous rise in the cost of energy across Europe. Not, by the way, the same in other parts of the world. So the importance to people is staggering, the cultural differences in terms of how important this is and how on people's agendas it is. And I've been looking at what can be done as a distributor, because we don't make the tech. So we can ask Samsung, LG, Sharp NEC to be better, but there's only so much we can influence, and there's only some product cannot be made in the most sustainable way because it won't be fit for purpose. And these businesses are doing lots. So Samsung have a campaign called Everyday Sustainability, and they've worked on their packaging. They recycle their resin and put that back into the sort of bubble wrap and fluffing out packaging that they use. They've addressed their circular economy. So this is great. This is all reducing their operational carbon footprint. They are working to source their materials in a more ethical and sustainable way. This is all great. Then those products ship into our warehouse and we ship them out to customers. Now, we can address our logistics and make sure that that's better, but we can actually go even further than that. And a great example of this is in digital signage. So digital signage using OLED technology. The majority of digital signage estates don't turn on the light sensor capability in displays. So when you do that, those light sensors will adjust the output accordingly, dependent on the ambient light that it's competing with. So you can save energy. LG actually released a sustainability or an ESG report, and 80% of the carbon emissions of a display is in its usage, not in its creation, not in the materials that were sourced, but in how it's used. And yet today, rather than turn off a product, and we all do this in our homes still with standby modes as well, but even worse in the commercial world, we send projectors and screens a black image so that they are constantly running to avoid any restart failure. Well, the world's moved on, guys. We're going to have to accept and tolerate some failure on restart for that carbon footprint reduction by switching off these screens overnight. Actually, traditional LCD technology, that screen's not working any less for that black image than it was for your static white image. If you can reduce the animations that are in your content, if they're not necessary, this will also reduce the carbon footprint. And one that I've adopted and I learned from a great company called Invidis Consulting, who have an impact board that are looking at this and green signage campaign, is white backgrounds or too much white in presentation content that you then have delivered on an LED screen. So the LED screen will work so much harder to produce white over any other color on the spectrum. Midwich, historically, our PowerPoint templates have always had a white background. Simple change. Mine's now purple, or I use different colors, but I switch that up just to make a little difference. There's tons of these. And an associate of mine in Australia, Andy Seedor, has built a program, shall we call it, called the Milliwatts program. His business is called the Kilowatt Company. And he's working with CEDIA and Avixa and others to white label that. And he's actively recruiting for checklists. And one of the first checklists that he's got for system designers is one for a theatre. And an example of a checklist would be during rehearsals, has the system been programmed to ensure that not all the house lights automatically are up and only the stage lights are in use, because the majority of those back seats in that theatre aren't going to be in use during rehearsals. So, why has it been programmed to have everything up? And these are really basic things that you look at and go, why haven't we been doing this for a really long time? But we can make those changes now, and we can make some of those changes as individuals. So I'm part of a group that is called the Sustainability Task Force, put together by Avixa and comprised entirely of volunteers. And we are actively recruiting for educational content, I guess, that can help people. Because I know a lot of people who want to do things, who want to improve, who want to feel like they are joining the cause against climate change, but they haven't, or they don't feel that their company has the same goals as them. So this, we're looking at what can we create in terms of a library of content to give some people some of those ideas, because every little change that every individual makes helps. I'm very fortunate to be working for a company that's taking it very seriously, and also who give me time out of my role to do this volunteering with the task force and look at what more we can do. I'm giving a talk on screen versus green and the power of content and what you can do to make those changes next week, actually, at Innovation House. So yeah, it's close to my heart. There's so much more we can improve upon, and there's so many experts out there who have stories to share that I can't wait to hear from, really, and think, brilliant, I can make that improvement. I can make this improvement.
My last question, Janny, if you could see the AV industry change in one way, well, just one, how would you like to see it change? What would you advise it should do?
I mean, that's the sort of question you give before the interview, isn't it? So you have a think about it. Yeah. I think the AV industry has come a really long way, right? So I was put on the spot for an interview at ISE, and I got myself in a bit of spot bother. Somebody said, "What's the biggest change that you've seen since your first ISE show to now?" Well, my first ISE show, every booth was full of, they call them booth babes. They don't work for the company. They're they're dressed in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was really young when I entered the industry, so I naively would go up to some of these girls and say, "Can you tell me about this little black box?" And of course, they couldn't tell me anything, because they didn't work for the company. And that's the biggest change, I guess, I've seen from then to now. I didn't actually say that on that interview, but I couldn't get it out of my head.
Mm.
And I think that, that was the start maybe of that sort of industry look changing and to where we are now. And I think that the one biggest change is that we will continue to improve across the board in all ESG. So all environmental, and that part, the environmental part of ESG, is the bit that's closest to my heart personally. But I absolutely support all the initiatives around diversity and inclusivity, and particularly inclusivity across our industry. So ESG as a whole, the one change would be that the entire industry adopts a continuous improvement mantra.
Janny, you've been a great guest. Thanks so much for your time.